Okay, I want to revisit the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. I know I went over it pretty quickly in the module, so I want to come back to that and how it could be used, or how I might expect you to be using the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. So in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, you may recall then that we let the letter P represent the frequency of dominant alleles, and we let Q represent the frequency of recessive alleles. So that P plus Q would equal 100%. So the percent of P plus percent of Q would equal 100%. And if you expand that binomial, P plus Q squared would equal to P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared is equal to 1 squared, or also equal to 1. So again, what that's representing then would be the frequency of dominant alleles, frequency of recessive alleles. And so if we expand that then, the P squared would be representing the frequency of homozygous dominants in the population, 2PQ representing the frequency of heterozygotes in the population, and the Q squared representing the frequency of homozygous recessives in the population. So that if I gave you a value for P then, if I tell you that P is equal to 0.3, so that would be 30% of the alleles in the population then are dominant alleles. From that, you should be able to figure out that Q is equal to 0.7. Again, because P plus Q is equal to 1. So if this is 0.3, 0.3 from 1 would be 0.7. So if I give you either of these values, I would expect you to be able to compute the other value. Furthermore then, if you know that P is 0.3 and Q is 0.7 then, when we look at the expanded binomial then, you would just plug in those values to compute the frequencies of the different types of alleles. So again, assuming then that PQ represents the frequency of homozygous dominance, then, P times P, 0.3 times 0.3 would be 0.09. So we would expect 9% of the population to be homozygous dominant. 2PQ, so you'd multiply 2 times 0.3 times 0.7. 0.3 times 0.7 is 0.21, times 2 is 0.42. So 42% of the population then would be heterozygous. And then Q squared would be 0.7 times 0.7 would equal to 0.49. And so if we add those up, we get 100% of the population made up of either homozygous dominants, heterozygous, or homozygous recessives. So again, using the Hardy-Weinberg Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium then, you can predict what the frequencies of homozygous dominants, heterozygous, and homozygous recessives would be in a population. So that's how I would expect you to be able to use it. Now the downside of the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is that that's predicting what you would have in the absence of selection. So if you see that in nature, then what it's telling you is that natural selection is not occurring in that population. And so it's very rare that what you predict is actually what you see, because generally in nature is selecting for traits. So you do not see the Hardy-Weinberg ratios actually in nature. Okay, so I just again wanted to come back to that and be able and make sure that you understand that if I give you one of the values, you should be able to calculate those frequencies.